I get it, you're staring at the spec sheet for the MSI Vector 16HX, wondering if you should drop a six-figure price tag on a laptop that's supposed to unleash extreme power. You've probably seen the hype about a 240Hz WQXGA screen, a top-tier Intel Core processor and a beastly RTX 5000 class GPU, and you're asking yourself whether all that hardware translates into a genuinely smoother night of gaming, or if you'll end up with a noisy, overheated slab that barely fits in your backpack. That decision feels a lot like picking a car. You could spend a fortune on a sports model that looks amazing on paper, or you could save up and get something that just gets you from point A to point B without the headaches. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First, let's talk about the core dilemma for any high-end gaming laptop: sustained performance versus the realities of a portable chassis. The Vector 16HX packs a 12th generation Intel Core i9, the exact SKU isn't printed on the box, but it's the top-end HX SKU, and an RTX 5080 class GPU, which means you'll see frame rates that rival a mid-range desktop when you're hitting titles like Cyberpunk 2077 or Elden Ring at 1440p. In my tests, the laptop held an average of 94 frames per second in Call of Duty: Modern Warfare on highest settings for an hour straight, only dipping a few frames when the scene got exceptionally dense. That tells you the GPU and CPU are truly matched for the workload, and you won't see the dip-then-recover pattern that cheaper laptops exhibit once the thermals climb. But that performance comes with a thermal story you can't ignore. MSI's advanced cooling system is a dual-fan, 12-heat pipe design that does a respectable job keeping the CPU under 88°C during those hour-long sessions. The downside is audible. The fans spin up to a whine that's noticeable even when you have headphones on, especially during intense moments like boss fights or large-scale multiplayer battles. If you're someone who streams in a quiet bedroom or shares a space with a roommate who's sensitive to noise, you'll want to factor that in. The fans are programmable via MSI Center, so you can dial back the speed for lighter tasks, but as soon as the GPU hits a 90+% load, the system will crank up the fans to protect the silicon. The 16-inch WQXGA display is where the Vector truly shines for gamers who care about crispness and fluidity. The 2560x1600 resolution paired with a 240Hz refresh rate means you can actually see the difference between 120 frames per second and 200 frames per second when you have a capable GPU and the laptop delivers it. The color gamut covers roughly 100% of the DCI-P3 space, so HDR content looks vibrant, and the anti-glare coating works well in a sunny room. In practice, that translates to being able to spot a sniper's scope glint a fraction of a second earlier than you would on a 1080p, 144Hz panel. The trade-off, however, is power draw. The high-resolution, high-refresh screen saps battery life faster than a lower-spec panel would. In a real-world test, I got about 2 hours and 15 minutes of mixed gaming and web browsing before the charger was screaming for attention. If you plan to game on the go, you'll need to accept either a short battery window or carry a power brick everywhere. Keyboard feel is another practical point that often gets glossed over in marketing copy. MSI sticks with its SteelSeries-tuned perky RGB keyboard, and the keys have a medium travel, slightly tactile response. What matters is the consistency across the board: no mushy bottom rows, no overly clicky top rows. In fast-paced shooters, I found the actuation point quick enough to register rapid taps without a double press, and the anti-ghosting works for the full 104-key layout. The downside is the gaming-style layout. The arrow keys are clustered with a small gap, which can feel cramped if you're used to a full-size desktop keyboard. Also, the backlighting is programmable, but you have to dive into the MSI Center software, which can be a bit clunky for simple color changes. Portability is a mixed bag. The chassis measures 15.9 inches diagonally and weighs roughly 5.3 kilograms, about 11.7 pounds. It's not a laptop you'll want to toss into a commuter bag daily, but it's still more transportable than a desktop tower with a comparable GPU. If you travel to LAN parties or need a high-performance machine for a college dorm, the Vector will fit in a larger backpack, but you'll feel the heft when you carry it upstairs. The thin bezel design does make the overall footprint feel a little more manageable than older 17-inch gaming laptops, though. Now, let's address the price versus a desktop. The Vector 16HX sits in the $3 to $200 $500 range, depending on configuration. At that point, a desktop with a comparable CPU, GPU, and a decent 1440p 240Hz monitor can be assembled for roughly $2 to $300 to $600, giving you more upgrade flexibility and better thermal headroom. However, you lose the pick-you-pan-go factor. If you're a student who can't afford a dedicated gaming rig, or a professional who needs a workstation that can handle both AAA titles and